Lost in most of the high-level college football talk at the end of last year was the success that Dan Lanning and Oregon had, even though they just missed the playoffs by a combined 6 points, with both losses coming against a loaded Washington team. Now, Lanning is one of the best up-and-coming stars of college football, and after corralling Dillon Gabriel from Oklahoma through the transfer portal, the departure of Bo Nix has been somewhat softened, even though it still is a big loss, and the entrance into the Big Ten is going to be a lot smoother, but for a reason that really has nothing to do with skill set and more about mindset. See, Oregon is not the flashy offensive team of old only. Lanning has managed to turn them into truly a grimy, physical, nasty, and angry group that's led by the guys up front. So don't let the passing statistics fool you. They don't want to run it at you. They want to run it through you. He did to Oregon what Kyle Whittingham did to Utah. In a conference full of flash and sizzle, why not be the hammer instead? It'll set you apart. And that's the perfect recipe and archetype for a team entering the Big Ten, and why I believe Oregon will most likely face Ohio State twice, with neither one of those games technically being on the road. Now, getting Evan Stewart at wide receiver from A&M to replace some of the pieces that they've missed, including Troy Franklin, is nice, but what makes the Ducks go isn't on the outside, it's up front. Now, last year, what was supposed to be a rebuilding year on the offensive line after losing 4 starters and a position coach turned into a group that was a finalist for the Joe Moore Award, one of the most prestigious awards in the country for an offensive line, really the only one. And the scariest part is that they're all pretty much back. So expect Oregon to be able to line up and run it against everybody that they play against. Oregon's offensive line versus Ohio State's defensive line is going to be must-see TV. You better put the women and children to bed before that one comes on. Now, as far as the defensive side of the ball, the Ducks did lose some key pieces on the interior defensive line, but they were able to pick up some solid guys through the transfer portal, and they have some young guys who've bided their time. And let's face it, Dan Lanning is going to have that defense ready to bite through a brick wall. So Duck fans shouldn't be losing any sleep over that side of the ball. Now, having said all that, it's not just the personnel, it's the persona. And it's the culture that has been cultivated in Eugene. It's one of being a bully, embracing aggression, and trying to snatch your soul while snatching the win. And with Dan the Dementor, those boys are going to be ready to play in the Big Ten because deep down, that's who they've really been this whole time. Guy who knows a little bit about the Big Ten, former Michigan quarterback to my left, David Cohn. My brother, former Western State, Colorado.
Who knows a lot about the Big Ten.
Blaine Crane, who knows a good amount about the Big Ten. A good amount. David, look, people will say, oh, Dan Lanning hasn't won the big game. Dan Lanning hasn't proven that he can be at the top of the college football world when it matters the most. And I get it. He hasn't won a bunch of big games or quote-unquote the big game at Oregon. But they've been building, they've been building. And it feels like it's only a matter of time with this team. Because, again, no offense to Chip Kelly. I mean, they played in a national championship game, which, they did lose to Cam Newton at Auburn in 2010. That's neither here nor there. This is a totally different monster.
They have been building. They have been building. Let's just look at the facts of the situation here. 8 players drafted into the NFL from last year's Oregon team, including your quarterback, goes 12. Bo Nix, you lost your center as well, and you talked about Troy Franklin. Well, you replace Bo Nix with Dillon Gabriel, who's never thrown for under 3,000 yards in a season when he's played that entire year healthy. Just over 7,000 passing yards in 2 years at Central Florida, just under 7,000 passing yards in 2 years at Oklahoma. That's the guy who's coming in to play in an offense where Bo Nix just threw for 4,500 yards, okay? They're going to be just fine at the quarterback position. Now let's look at the conference that you're coming into. Who's been running that conference for the last 3 years? Michigan. Their head coach just went to the NFL. They lost their quarterback. They lost a lot of pieces on the offensive line. You do play them on the road, but hey, we're going to find out more about Michigan very soon when Texas comes to town in week 2. Who else has been running that conference? The Buckeyes. They're going to be as good as it gets in the country, one of the most loaded rosters, but you get them at home like you talked about. Now, what about the other schools who are coming in from the Pac-12 with you into the Big Ten? USC is losing a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback who just went number 1 overall, and you don't play him in the regular season anyway. UCLA, another one of those teams. You got their starting quarterback for much of last year, and Dante Moore, to come over and transfer to your team, and their coach also went to become the OC at the Buckeyes, and then the team you lost to twice last year, Washington, their head coach takes the Alabama job. Their quarterback goes top 10 in the draft as well. I'm just looking
and
at
you get him at home, right?
It's just circumstantial. You do get Washington at home, last game of the season, November 30th. I'm just looking at the details and the circumstance. I mean, Explain to me how Oregon isn't setting themselves up to come in and make a splash in the Big Ten right away.
I mean, I look at that schedule, and Blaine, if you don't mind bringing it up, I want to go through.
Yeah,
David hit on some superlatives. Go through the schedule. This could not line up more perfectly for Oregon in year one going into the Big Ten.
All right, you started off with Idaho.
Murder.
Boise State at home.
That game will be good for about 18 minutes.
At Oregon State.
That's gonna be. I know it's a rivalry game.
They'll kill them.
They'll kill them. You lost your coach. You lost DJU. You lost Amy Martinez. Sorry to our friend Heartbroken Beaver, but let's play a game and look each other in the eyes and be honest. It's probably not going to be good.
You're at UCLA.
Win.
Michigan State at home.
Win.
Ohio State at home.
See, this is the one. You can lose this one and still be fine, but you get them at home. Is this Will Howard? When you look at Ohio State's schedule, it's going to be interesting with him if he ends up, truly being the guy going on. I mean, that place is going to be nuts in Eugene. That's when I think Oregon can win, even though Ohio State's roster is absolutely loaded. Quarterback position, a couple questions.
What game is this almost slip-up game? This is what I look at when it's at Oregon. You go to Purdue.
That you got to win that one.
No, I think it's on the road at Michigan or
on the road at Michigan or on the road at Wisconsin.
Yes,
right.
Yeah, those two. Now, hey, you brought up the Michigan point. Michigan's still going to make them. Michigan's not going to be bad. Nobody's saying Michigan's going to be bad. But if you gave me the choice and said, Jake, this year, 2024, not last year, this year in 2024, if you could get Ohio State at home and Michigan on the road, you would much rather take that over getting Michigan at home and Ohio State on the road a million times.
I mean, Ohio State and Oregon it's highly likely both these teams will be undefeated.
I agree with that.
When they meet each other.
Well, keep going.
All right, then you have
Illinois at home.
All right, I pulled up.
David, you got to pull it up.
Yeah, on the road at Michigan. Maryland at home, on the road at Wisconsin. And then, like we said, you finish with Washington at home.
I mean, you look around the rest of the schedule with what people are returning. I got a really sneaking suspicion Oregon's going to play Ohio State twice next year. And again, with the 12-team playoff, hell, you never know. They could play 3 times.
Well, I mean, if you're one thing, you just got to worry about Dylan Gabriel's health.
That's why you got Dante Moore.
The way Dylan plays, Dylan throws his body around during the game. And he's a great athletic guy, great arm, great instincts as a quarterback. But his body, from a health standpoint, I'm worried about. And if you go back and look, and I know what they're doing right now. I mean, you have 8 guys drafted. I'm pretty sure it's a program record. What Dan's doing, he's building up front on both sides of the ball. But I go back to last year's game and against Washington, both games, and we talk about the physicality of Oregon being the difference. You got beaten physically and finessed in that game twice. So what big game has Oregon won?
That's the thing. No, they have been knocking at the door. That was what I was saying right after the open. I'm not sitting here saying that Dan Lanning is as good of a coach as Kirby Smart or that Dan Lanning has accomplished all of these accolades. But when you look at the way this team has been built and these building blocks, name a team that's going to be more pissed off outside of Oregon after the way it went down last year. And they did get big boyed by the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line of Washington. Look at the draft and what happened there. Also, you had Michael Penix. Also, you had 3 wide receivers that were NFL players. Those guys are all gone. You got a brand new coach. There's no way in hell that, and look, I've got a ton of respect for Washington. And Washington proved me wrong last year against Oregon. That one of the few times I had to kind of eat crow because Oregon didn't come through for me. So, I'm not sitting here saying that I think Oregon is going to win the national championship. But when I look at this team and I look at the schedule and all the variables and all the bouncing balls that you've got to follow to be able to get to the playoff and make a run, they have everything. It's going to come down to the interior defensive line, I think, for Oregon. And if I'm sitting here worried about a defensive position group with Dan Lanning as the head coach and the guys he's put around him on that staff defensively, I'm feeling pretty good if I'm an Oregon fan. You got Jamari Caldwell coming over from Houston that was a second-team All-Big 12 player. You got some young guys, Ben Roberts, a couple other guys who have worked their way up, who have bided their time behind a couple guys that they lost 3, right? Three guys on the interior defensive line. But Oregon has players, I mean, even some of the freshmen they signed, you're looking at 6'3", 370, 6'2", 310. Dan Lanning isn't bringing in some Charmin ultra soft guys on the interior of that defensive line. He understands what he has to have. This Oregon team is pissed off. They're good. They have answers up front. One of the deepest teams up front on the offensive line. I mean, look at offensive lines across the country. Not many more teams are returning this amount of quality. And Oregon lost their center early in the NFL draft, but they've had a guy who's played at right guard, who's bumped over and played a little bit of center that they feel good about. And I think Dan Lanning is one of the best motivators in college football. I really think, I just think they're going to be a problem.
And a quick word on the Dillon Gabriel injury. So let's just recap this. 2019, he's a freshman. He throws for 3,600 yards, 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. As a sophomore, 3,500 yards, 32 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. 2021, he did get the injury. Up to that point, he was completing his passes at 69%. Transfers to Oklahoma after the injury, throws for 3,100 yards, 25 touchdowns, 6 picks. And the next year, this past season, 3,600 yards, 30 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, completing at a 70% completion percentage. So, kind of like we said with Michael Penix Jr., guys get injured. It's a collision sport. When you do, all you can do is bounce back. I mean, and that's a 2-year sample size.
I get it, but I wouldn't say you improved at the quarterback position.
I mean, that's fair enough because Bo Nix just threw.
But I think too,
45.
I know 2 teams. I know 2 teams that are extremely pissed about how it went down last year. I'm probably one of Florida State, one of Georgia.
Well, Florida State, I don't think Florida State's got the Cats. DJU's going to go win a national.
But I'm saying from a piss standpoint about how it went down.
Yeah, well, we can all be pissed. Are you good enough to win a round?
But I mean, they're going to run into the same thing this year in Ohio State. You're going to run into a team with an elite offensive line, elite defensive line, elite receivers, and supposedly elite quarterback in the transfer. I'm just waiting.
And who's calling Will Howard an elite quarterback? I think Will Howard's a guy.
From what I've seen,
they're just hoping
at Kansas State.
Will Howard was going to get his ass beat out by Avery at Kansas State. That's why he left.
Would you say he wasn't elite at Kansas State?
No, he wasn't elite. He was a guy that could run the ball. He's DJU basically. He's a guy that could run the ball pretty well. He's a big guy that struggled to make the routine throws routine. Has a decent deep ball. But they're just hoping. Why hasn't Will Howard been named the starting quarterback at Ohio State yet? If he's so elite.
That's the big question to me. I mean, why'd you bring him in?
Devin Brown, who couldn't throw
why'd
up
you pay him all that money?
He had the flu?
Why'd you pay him all that money to come in if he's not going to play? I've watched Will Howard at Kansas State.
You think Will
Howard's a damn good football player, what I saw.
You would take Will Howard over Dillon Gabriel?
No. Who is saying that?
Well, again, so my whole point is this. You brought up Washington. Will Howard is not Michael Penix Jr. I think Ryan Day and them are just hoping to God that Will Howard can get in the car and just not crash it because he's got something so he could be a Stetson Bennett. You've got a great team around you, and then you improve and you improve and you improve and turn into something that was better than what you had before. But worst case scenario, you steer the ship. The man isn't Michael Penix. Ohio State is better around the quarterback than Oregon is. But Dillon Gabriel is better than Will Howard, and they get him at home. I think we could be in a world just like we talked about in the SEC, where maybe Ole Miss finds a way to beat Georgia in the regular season and then loses in the SEC championship game. I think you could see the same thing where Oregon finds a way to beat Ohio State at home during the regular season and then loses in the Big Ten championship game. My whole point is that if we're going to sit here and compare Ohio State and Washington to going against Oregon, I think there's some huge differences. Not anywhere else but at quarterback, but that's still a big difference. And you look at what Ohio State lost out wide with Marvin Harrison Jr., right? Some of these other guys, I know they return talent. I know Jeremiah's really good. I know Stover's really good at the tight end. But I do think there is going to be a difference.
Stover got drafted.
So I thought Stover came back.
Hey, he's gone.
Stover got drafted.
Yeah.
Really, where did he go? Where did he end up going?
I'll look it up. It's funny you mentioned Stetson Bennett's name, though, because I was just thinking that when you said Oregon didn't get better at the quarterback position, which is true, but when your quarterback gets drafted 12 overall, sometimes the best you can hope for is just not to get a lot worse. But think about all those Georgia quarterbacks that we saw throughout my youth growing up, some of the best in the country. Matt Stafford, right? DJ Shockley, David Green. Those were never the guys that took them to the mountaintop. It was Stetson Bennett who won back-to-back national championships, which was wild. So if the rest of your roster is intact, you can win a national championship.
Well,
Stover went 4th round, pick 123 to the Houston Texans.
Yes. Right? Well, ask yourself this question, because again, every year is different. Dillon Gabriel, right? Would he have been the best quarterback? Was Bo Nix the best quarterback in the Pac-12 last year?
Well, no.
Not from a draft standpoint. Name a better quarterback in the Big Ten than Dillon Gabriel?
Right now?
Right now. So you can make the argument Oregon is in a better position from the quarterback standpoint in the conference they are in this year than they
I like
were
Dylan
last year.
Gabriel, man.
Well, yeah.
I do too.
The moxie he showed in the Red River Shootout
It was a number one pick.
Do what?
From the quarterback last year.
Yeah, but again, it is what it is. It's in reality. You probably have the best quarterback in the conference. I do agree with you, Blaine. I think he's got a little bit of that Jaden Daniels problem where your body doesn't match your ferociousness as a runner. I think so. You need to go back and look at Oklahoma. Dylan Gabriel took some shots, and Dylan Gabriel's a little guy. Dylan Gabriel's not a big guy at all. He's smaller than Tua. Like he's smaller than Tua was, I believe. So
He's 6 foot, 200 pounds.
Yeah, that's why getting Dante Moore, I think, was huge too, just as an insurance policy. And you took a good player away from a team that you play on the road. So it's kind of the old 2-for-1 through the transfer portal. But we want to know what you think. We got Chris Marler coming on. The phone line's open, 7:15 a.m. Central, 1-855-236-3228. I still can't believe I remember that number off the top of my head. All right, Booster Club.
Hit that like, hit that subscribe button. If you donate, it's on topic. It will get read. We're going to start off with BJ, the gravedigger. Says, nah, the disrespect for Howard is too much. He at least gets twice as good as DoorDash Stetson Bennett.
Listen, why? It's amazing. It's amazing.
Name.
How can Stetson Bennett still be underrated and get crapped on like that? I don't know how you could watch that and watch what Stetson did in the big moments. I would take Stetson Bennett over Will Howard 10 out of 10 times, and it's not even close. You got beat out by a curly-headed guy that can't throw a slant at Kansas State. So and again, I hope Will Howard is good because I think this Ohio State team, if he can figure it out, be the best in the country. I think them and Georgia overall probably have the best rosters. I think Oregon has a top 5 roster, but Will Howard doesn't, again, I said this about Peyton Thorne. Like, he doesn't need to go out there and be Batman. Just be a really, really good Robin. Run the RPOs right. Be a threat to run the ball. Throw the ball away when you need to throw it away. Throw the check down, and guess what? Just throw it anywhere near some of these Ohio State wide receivers, and they're going to make the play. I don't think Will Howard's a bad player, but his ass ain't C.J. Stroud, and Kyle McCord went 11-1, buddy. 11-1. He doesn't throw it as well as Kyle does.
I mean, 25 touchdowns, 10 picks, 3,000 yards there. It's not terrible.
No. Again, he wouldn't be at Ohio State if he was terrible. I think he's better than Devin Brown, to be honest with you. But is he going to be better than Julian Sayin in a year? I don't think so. So, again, but that's the beautiful part is sometimes it's not how good the driver is, it's how good the car is. And you are getting into a Lambo. You are getting into a Ferrari. You are getting into an F1 car. Just don't run it into the side of the track and you'll win the race.
All right, let's go to Jor. He says, tell me the difference between Oregon and Penn State.
Quarterback.
Right now.
Quarterback. Drew Aller, and I think there's blame to go around for the passing situation at Penn State last year. I mean, they protected Drew Aller a lot because they didn't have to throw the ball around a lot. But in the games that James Franklin and Penn State had to throw the ball, they couldn't do it because they had no chemistry built around. No chemistry built around. I don't think Penn State's very good at wide receiver right now, to be honest with you. I mean, hell, one of their guys, I know didn't end up living up to the hype last year with Keandre, but he's at Auburn now. I would take Dylan Gabriel over Drew Aller 1,000 out of 1,000 times. And you know what? I do hope Drew figures it out because I think Drew has a ton of talent. But the more I look at Drew Aller and wipe my eyes, the more I see Christian Hackerberg, zero sugar. That's what I see.
Schedule's still favorable for Penn State, though. No Michigan on this schedule. You get the Buckeyes at home. You get Washington at home. They do open up at West Virginia. That's always fun.
Yeah, and look, Neil Brown, he saved his job last year.
$5 donation from Nathan J. says, comparing Will Howard to Stetson Bennett is absolutely disrespectful.
It's asinine. It's asinine. Don't tell on yourself like that.
Man, I'm pulling up. I got Stetson Bennett's, so his senior year stats here when they won the second national championship. Stetson Bennett, 4,100 passing yards, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 68% completion percentage.
And could run.
You blew it in the NFL, man. You got drafted by Sean McVay and Matt Stafford got hurt.
Yeah.
He could have filled in and played well.
Could have been a hero, but you already were a hero. And damn Coors Lights.
All right, let's go to BS. He says, Oregon will lose 2 games early and then dominate the Big Ten.
Who will those two be to, though? Like it's
Early.
To me, if they were gonna drop a couple,
Oregon?
Yeah, if they were going to drop a couple, it would be at the back end of that schedule. Maybe after a big upset over Ohio State at home, then you drop one at Camp Randall where they're jumping around, and maybe Michigan finds a way to have an orgy in the backfield and scoop one out. But I don't see the front half of that schedule does not scare me.
Maybe I don't know, man. Maybe at Corvallis is the sneaky game. I mean, Oregon State's still going to be a rivalry game.
It will be
super disrespected.
It will be, but that's the first kind of, And listen, no offense to Boise State, and I like that they hired Spencer, who after Andy Avalos got fired last year, kind of Spencer Danielson brought them out of the wilderness a little bit and gave them a little stability going into this year. But Oregon's a lot better than Boise State. Like I said, that game will be interesting for about the first 4.5 drives probably. But I just don't see the first big game of Oregon's year, which I don't care how good Oregon State is. I don't care if Oregon State's in a conference or not. Oregon is going to get up for the Civil War. Like they just are. And this is Dylan Gabriel's first chance to make a big stamp at Oregon as the quarterback and then to kind of, start ramping up before the Buckeyes come to town.
I think a lot of the questions that we're asking here are going to be asked throughout fall camp too, is like, how good is the starting quarterback for the Buckeyes going to be? Is that going to be Will Howard? How effective is he? Same thing for Michigan. Who's going to play quarterback, and how's that run game going to look after you lost so many offensive linemen? Sharon Moore got elevated to head coach. He's an offensive line guy. They're going to be able to run the football, and Donovan Edwards looked really good in the spring. And then for Wisconsin, who Oregon also plays on the road, how good is Tyler Van Dyke when he goes up to the Big Ten?
Yeah, that's true, Don't you feel like his game translates a little bit more to the big? Yeah, it's more of a pro style.
I thought he did better last year when he wasn't projected as this top 10 quarterback in the country. He played more within himself.
I agree with that. What's up, YouTube? Thanks for stopping by. If you haven't already, you don't mind, hit that subscribe button. We really, really appreciate it.